Hello, amazing entrepreneur. It's Tash Corbin here, and welcome to another episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. This is episode number 223, which means you can find all the relevant links and show notes over at tashcorbin.com/223. We have another Q&A episode of the podcast today, and I've got a brilliant question from Mel about facing up to the mindset blocks and gremlins that might rear their head when you are creating and promoting a webinar. So let's dive right in. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Before we jump into Mel's brilliant question today, a quick reminder that if you'd like me to answer your question on the Heart-Centered Business Podcast and give you a lovely little shout out as well, you can submit your question at tashcorbin.com/question. Super simple. Now, as I said, today's question comes from the amazing Mel Gorry. You can find her on Instagram. Her handle is at melissa.gorry. And Melissa asked a great question about running a webinar. And I love this because, number one, I love Mel so much. If you don't follow her, please make sure you go and check her out. She is a business and marketing specialist who specifically works with women who have chronic conditions or other reasons why they have limited energy and therefore need to build their marketing and business strategies in a way that works with that limited energy. And Mel is absolutely brilliant at what she does, and I absolutely adore her. So I'm super happy to be answering her question today. So Mel says, when launching and releasing my first webinar, so many mindset gremlins reared their head. I was so unprepared and didn't know how to combat it. Why does this happen? What are the best strategies to combat and build resilience to those mindset blocks? And Tash, what came up for you in your first webinar? Great questions, Mel, and I'm really excited to talk about this one today. So when it comes to creating and launching a webinar, it's such a great strategy for your business. It's a great way to get in front of a lot of people at once, to talk about your services, to help people move from where they are to where they want to be. And it also does great things for growing your list, building your audience, creating momentum on social media. There are so many reasons to love webinars. And if you haven't watched my podcast episode previously that is about why I love webinars so much, then I'll make sure I link to that in the show notes for you because I am a big webinars fan. But think about the fact that when you start a business, it is one of the most powerful personal development journeys you can go on. And when you think about why it's such a strong personal development journey, it's because it brings up all your stuff. You are the boss now. You have to do the work. You need to be self-motivated. If there's a self-sabotage or procrastination bone in your body, you're going to find it when you start a business. You need to ask for money. You need to be seen and visible. Talk yourself up. Talk about your services. So knowing that starting and growing a business is the ultimate in personal development journeys and brings up all our mindset stuff for us to be able to pay attention to it and clear it, then when we think about a webinar, it's the one part of running a business and marketing strategy where every single one of those things kind of comes into play. Because number one, you are saying, I want to teach you something. So that means you are positioning yourself as an expert, which brings up all the imposter syndrome things. Number two, you need to get out there and promote it and do all the marketing and set yourself up and put your slides together. It allows you to leave things till the last minute. So if that's one of your particular mindset blocks, that will come up. You can be self-sabotaging. You can be procrastinating. All of the, I need to get it done. It's got a deadline. I've made a commitment to these people. Stuff can come up as well. So that's another area. Number three, you're going to be more visible. You are standing in front of a bunch of people virtually and saying, one, come to my webinar. And then when they're at the webinar, you're saying, I've got something to say. And so you are at maximum visibility when you're launching and delivering a webinar. And then four, at the end of it, you're usually asking for the sale for something. So you're asking about money and it brings up all your money blocks. So it's no surprise that a webinar is something that can bring up a lot of those mindset blocks for us. But at the same time, that's what we want. We want to be paying attention to those things so that we can clear them and move through them and allow ourselves to expand and receive more and work more effectively in our business and get more done and whatever it is that we need to do. So at the end of the day, whilst it's like, no, it brings up all your mindset blocks, at the same time, I'm like, yeah, it brings up all your mindset blocks. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to take action, notice what those thoughts are, notice what those gremlins are, and then use the tools and strategies that we have in our toolkit to uncover, clear, and release them. And so it's actually a really beautiful opportunity to grow your mindset and undertake a bit of a leap in that personal development journey that comes with starting and growing a business. Super beautiful. Now, the second part of your question that I'm going to answer is what came up for me when I ran my first webinar. And I'll tell you, my first webinar I ran in 2013. I was a couple of months into my business journey and I was running a webinar. It was called 12 Steps to Creative Success. And it was a webinar on how to grow a creative business, whether you were an artist or a crafter, some kind of maker. So it was a webinar for makers. And that was my niche when I first started my business. Well, it's my second niche, but anyway, was the first webinar that I did was for that specific niche. Now, number one, I only had 13 people sign up for that webinar, despite the fact that I thought I had spewed up content about it onto the internet for 2 weeks solid. And I felt like everyone in my entire world must have known I was running this webinar, must have been sick of hearing me talk about it. And when I finished the webinar and I went back because I'd only got 13 people signed up and I wanted to do a little review of my marketing and how I'd shared about it, I'd emailed my 8-person mailing list once and I'd posted about it on my own Facebook page 0 times, and I had posted about it in 2 Facebook groups that I was in, once in each group. So I had shared about my webinar 3 times, and I thought I had told everyone about it and I was all over the internet. So it was a really interesting one for me, thinking that I had done all the right things, but in essence, I had been very quiet about this webinar and expected people to see it and sign up for it the first time they ever saw it. The only one way that I was talking about it, I just used copy paste promo copy that I was going to be using. I sent the same promo to my list as well as putting it in those 2 Facebook groups. So really it's a miracle those 13 people signed up, to be honest with you. Only one of those 13 people showed up live because I didn't send any reminder emails. I only shared the link of how people could come and join the webinar and watch along when they first signed up. And there were no reminders to anyone. So only one person showed up. I talked to that one person like she was 100 people. It was hilarious. And it brought up a lot of the who am I, because I hadn't had a successful artistic or creative business at that point in time. So I had a lot of imposter syndrome stuff coming up going, well, I know how to do the business part, but I'm not someone who's already done this before. I'm still growing my business, but I know what works on social media and what sorts of things I can encourage people to do. And I had already been working with 2 clients in creative businesses at that stage, but I was still like, who am I to say I can help people with this? Who am I? There's no way that I am the right person to be teaching people this. And I got really freaked out before I ran that webinar. But my desire to share the 12-step process I had developed and been working with my VIP clients on outweighed my fear. And I'm really grateful that it did, because it meant that even though I was really worried about it and I had the imposter syndrome and I only had 13 people sign up, I knew that even if just one person heard this 12-step process and it made their business growth journey easier, then my job was done and I would have been of service. And so that was a really interesting thing to reflect back on. And I did a lot of journaling and self-reflection on that webinar, the promo process, the delivery process, how I could improve it, the follow-up process, all of those things. And it was such an amazing growth time for me in my business. So I really do encourage you to tune into that desire to serve and that desire to tell people what to do and help them, and tap into your desire to really show up and make a difference in even just one person's life, because that will help with a lot of the mindset wobbles that can come up when you are creating and launching a webinar. So all of that being said, here are my top 4 tips on what to do about the mindset stuff when you are creating and launching a webinar. Number one is to tap into that service mindset. So whenever you are freaking out about something that you are going to do, you are focusing on yourself instead of focusing on your audience. So whenever you notice that, shift it. Okay, well, clearly I'm talking about myself and worrying about myself right now, but what about the people who are waiting for this information? What about the people who are sitting there thinking, no one understands me, no one is going to be able to help me, nothing works? I want you to think about them. And Mel, specifically for you, think about all those beautiful women who think they can't be successful in business because they're not well, who think that they can't be successful and do all the things that they need to do because of a physical limitation with their energy. And that makes me really teary thinking about that and thinking about all those women we are depriving of the amazing Mel Gorry because you're a bit worried about your mindset wobbles, right? And you've got your imposter syndrome happening or whatever's happening for you. And so when you focus on them instead, it really does make a huge difference to how you feel and the energy that you bring to that webinar. And I talk about this a lot. When I first started my business, I had a Post-it note on my desk. I had a pinboard behind my laptop and it said, "Do it for her." And those 4 words really drove a lot of what I did in the first 6 months of my business because it wasn't about me. It's very easy to make starting a business all about yourself. But at the end of the day, it's about who you're here to serve. And do it for her was what it took to get me into that service mindset whenever I was feeling wobbly. So number 1, service mindset. Number 2, take the pressure down. This is a practice. When I first ran my webinar, it was just to one person. Your audience will never be as small as it is today. The number of people who sign up for your webinars will never be as low as it is today. So take the pressure down. You don't need to be perfect. Just see this as a practice. And even if you completely mess it up and the 25 people who signed up to your webinar think, she doesn't know what she's talking about, that's 25 people out of how many billion who are out there in the world that you can serve. And 9 times out of 10, when you do mess it up, it doesn't create a sense for people, oh, I'd never work with her because she's terrible. It actually makes people go, oh my gosh, she's human. And it's actually a more engaging thing than if you get it perfectly right. So take the pressure off yourself to get it perfect. Embrace that feeling of it being a practice and allow yourself to experiment and learn to get better at it. And that ties into tip number 3, which is just trust that it gets easier. I remember my first podcast episodes, my first YouTube videos. I was so breathy and weird on camera. Like, I share this with the takeoff students. Whenever we get a big influx of takeoff students, I reshare one of my very early YouTube videos with them because I know how much it makes them feel better about what they're doing, because I was terrible and I was sitting on my balcony and the wind kept blowing my hair up and you can hardly hear me. There's a truck that goes behind me and I thought I was like doing this amazing, like super casual type thing on my video, and it was terrible. And so just know that it gets easier. You get better at speaking to your audience. With practice, you'll get better at facilitating that webinar, moving people through the process, dealing with the chat box and the screen and the slides and all of the things that are all going on at once. You will forget to record your webinar at some point along the way as well. It's usually a bit of a rite of passage and it will get easier. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing to remember. It takes practice. It'll get easier. And the way that it gets easier is by doing it more consistently. That's how you'll get better at it. And then number 4 is use your mindset tools. See this as an opportunity to uncover what those gremlins are, and then use the mindset tools in your toolkit to work through those gremlins. Because if that's showing up when you're in webinar mode, even if it's not showing up in other spaces in your business, it will be impacting your decision making in your business. It will be impacting your mindset in your business. And so bringing it to the surface is actually a good thing. And it will allow you to use those tools in your toolkit to work through that mindset block or whatever is coming up for you. So tapping, visualization, working with a practitioner, journaling, getting kinesiology, any of those sorts of things, if you found a mindset practice that really helps you, especially one where you're paying attention to those blocks and what's coming up and having strategies to clear them, that's going to be really helpful. You can use this webinar as an opportunity to go even deeper with your mindset practice. So a big thank you to the amazing Mel for her brilliant question about webinars, especially in relation to mindset blocks and the gremlins that come up. And if you have found that you've had a light bulb moment, or you've got follow-up questions from this podcast episode, or if you've got a tip on how to address the mindset stuff that comes up when you are running webinars, I want you to come over to the Heart-Centered Soul-Driven Entrepreneurs Facebook group and use the hashtag #PodcastAha. Let us know that you've been listening to episode number 223 and share your comments, light bulb moments, questions, and your tips on how to overcome those mindset wobbles that can come up when we are running webinars. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. Remember, all the show notes are over at tashcorbin.com/223. And if you want to ask a question and have me answer it here on the podcast, simply submit your question with all your details over at tashcorbin.com/question. Until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.